Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, that libertarian guy. But what I want to talk about today is the presidential vote numbers for Joe Jorgensen. Because I feel like there's a lot of people who are really like glass empty about it when there's actually a lot of reason for optimism in it. But you have to kind of put numbers in context and have realistic expectations about a realistic view of what the world is and how the world works. So let's break it down. I think the last I checked, Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen for the 2020 presidential election were at about 1.8 million votes, something like that, making it the second highest Libertarian Party vote total at a presidential race ever. Second. That's pretty good. Okay, that is pretty good. I think overall got like 1% of the vote, which is also pretty good. Again, you have to understand what the historical totals are, the political context. Then you start realizing this was pretty good. Because honestly, for my expectations were lower because I expected what other third parties had, which was they got pummeled. Okay, I think all the other emerging parties were like 0.2, 0.1%, which prior to 2016, it was actually even prior to 2012, was pretty much what the Libertarian was, along with every other third party before. Okay, so this signals something very, very cool. We were the only party that did more than that. We broke. It was a clear contrast between sort of like everybody else, that every non-duopoly party, all the rest, all around 0.1, 0.2 less, just got destroyed, ignored. And in between is the Libertarian Party. Yes, 1% isn't necessarily, it's only a fraction of what, let's say, the duopoly got, but it's multitudes of what pretty much, I think, was pretty much the same, like what all the other, bigger emerging parties got combined, and then any of them individually is like multitudes over. So this makes it clear, a very clear point that there's actually a libertarian vote that votes libertarian. Okay, and it's become sizable. Okay, no, it's not necessarily enough to win a national election. Understood. But it's clearly different than other emerging parties. Okay, clearly there is a base of voters who care about voting libertarian. Okay, I think Gary Johnson, because that's what everyone's comparing it to. They're like, oh, the Libertarian Party lost votes versus 2016. That was inevitable. 2016 was a very different year. I never figured we would match that. At least not in 2020. One, because Gary Johnson had a lot more name recognition, raised a lot more money, which he was able to do partly because of his name recognition, but also partly because of the nature of the 2016, where people, the aroma of politics is just that Hillary Clinton was inevitable. So everyone figured, okay, the election is done. Election doesn't matter. There's no way in the world Donald Trump's ever going to win, and Hillary Clinton's, of course, going to win. So if you were a Democrat, you weren't very pleased with Hillary Clinton if you were like more left-leaning, because, as far as progressives go, Hillary Clinton's more left of center. If you were a centrist, there's plenty of things to kind of really make you be skeptical of whether Hillary Clinton was like a good person. So you had reasons all along the left-wing spectrum to be like, maybe I won't vote for Hillary Clinton this year. She's going to win, but, I'm going to, since she's inevitably going to win, I'm going to stick to principle and go vote something else. Vote for Green Party, maybe vote Libertarian Party for like left of center, which I think a lot of left of center people did. And then on the right, there's a lot of people who are just like, Donald Trump is not a conservative by any stretch or means. Or Donald Trump does not have the kind of character of someone I want for president. And they were like, I'm not voting Republican if that's the candidate. So you had a lot of people on both sides who just looked at the candidate, felt that, okay, well, honestly, like, there's no way the election's going to go a very particular way. Everyone was certain that the election was going to go a particular way in 2016 and voted third party. And you had a sizable share, okay? Because, again, you have to take a look at it as, like, percentages, as far as, like, what percentage of the pie, not just the libertarian vote, but of the whole, like, pie. Like, I think you might have even, altogether, I don't know if you had double digits vote not Democrat Republican in 2016 altogether. Again, like 3% for Gary Johnson, and then you split that up, and then you had like Ed McMullen is an independent in like Utah, and then you had like other sort of stronger independent candidates that got decent chunks of the vote here and there. But when you add that all up together, it was actually a fairly large amount of votes that went to not Republican Democrat, okay, because it was that kind of year, okay. So everyone kind of did better. Libertarians still did better than everyone else, okay, and this is kind of when this trend really starts picking up. But it was a year that was good for third parties. As we saw in 2018 and we seeing in 2020, once Trump became president, suddenly it was no longer, politics are just going to be politics. People weren't necessarily as complacent about what their vote was anymore, and now started voting out of fear. Voting out of fear is like, okay, well, if you're in the left, it's like, okay, I have to go vote for Democrats, whether I like them or not. I can't give Trump any more power. And then Republicans who were pro-Trump were like, okay, well, that's a whole other story where basically there's that whole... They convinced themselves that it's this sort of weird conspiracy regarding Democrats. Not that I like Democrats at all, but basically the level of sort of hyperbole and the silo that a lot of sort of conservatives found themselves in, where they basically started really believing some wacky things, got wacky. Okay, so basically to them, like, voting and organizing against the Democrats wasn't just a matter of like, okay, I have ideas that I think are better than theirs and their ideas aren't good. It became a matter of, oh no, this is going to be the fall of society and all our children will be kidnapped and sold off. And like it's really weird. So basically, that room, that space where people felt like, okay, I can safely try to vote third party was not necessarily as there. But needless to say, again, of all those, now again, that everybody who voted for Gary Johnson in 2016, because again, most people aren't politically active people. They just aren't. So did everybody who voted for Gary Johnson necessarily become Libertarian Party members and get active? No, but a lot more than I expected did, and stuck around. Okay, that's part of the reason why you did have such a high vote share for Joe Jorgensen in 2020. Part of it is Gary Johnson voters who stuck around the last 4 years, because a lot of them did get involved in libertarian activism after the campaign. Many of them did not start out as sort of die-in-the-wool, radical libertarians, but many of them became so, okay? There are people who basically just kind of were like, okay, Gary Johnson seems like a reasonable guy, okay? He seems like a nice guy, and I'm going to go support him, okay? Now, again, I was someone who's kind of brought in with the Ron Paul revolution, so, like, I was young, and that kind of raw passion for ideals really excited me. But that's not everybody. There is a lot of people who just want good people to have good things happen to him. And Gary Johnson is someone who's generally a good person, okay? Whether you agree with Gary Johnson or everything, or whether you think he's the best, torchbearer for libertarian ideals, he's a good guy. And that's also something I loved about Ron Paul, that he's just a good guy. I think a lot of people focus so much more on his moral consistency, but I think what made Ron Paul sell even more, at least to me, the fact is that he was such a sort of good guy who lived a good life, and was good to the people around him, and focused on saying his message and not attacking the people around him, whether they disagreed with him, whether they attacked him. I sometimes feel like some of that is lost on some of the people who are the sort of the loudest pro Ron Paul people. I'm a huge pro Ron Paul person, but I try to live Ron Paul's example in the sense I focus on the message. I don't attack people just because they attack me, and I don't make it about the personality of others, because I want people to focus on the message. And I try to stick to what I believe. Okay, and that's to me what I took from Ron Paul 2008 and 2012. Okay, I feel like a lot of other people took the message that that unwavering is the only thing you should have taken from that. As long as I'm unwavering, it doesn't matter if I'm nice to others or if I attack those who attack me and all that stuff. Okay, not quite the example I thought Ron Paul set, but again, like any figure, it means things. Cultural symbols mean different things to different people. But on that note, but basically, there's a lot of people who supported Gary Johnson because they thought he was a good person. And in that, they came in, they got involved, they met some other people they liked, they learned some more about some issues maybe they didn't think about too hard before, because they met other libertarians who educated them about other things, and they became and then some of them they became friends with, and they became passionate libertarians. I know I've definitely, especially like places in New York, I've met people who just stuck around. Okay, some of them left, some of them were involved for a little while and then left after a while when they weren't too thrilled with some of the social dynamics within in some circles of the Libertarian Party, but they were still more libertarian than they were when they first started. And probably libertarian enough that even if they'd stopped being involved with the Libertarian Party, they couldn't vote Republican and Democrat again after that. And I think that is certainly something we see in the vote totals in 2020, that there is this segment that may or may not be involved with the Libertarian Party, because again, the Libertarian Party doesn't have 1.8 million dues-paying members. But there's this part of that vote that basically they voted one way, and they're okay with not going back. That's good. Okay, you were always going to lose a big chunk of that vote because again, a lot of that vote was just the nature of the time. Now, true, there were mistakes done in 2016. There were maybe those resources of the money that Gary Johnson did raise could have been used better and wiser. There were gaffes and whatnot that might have made what prevented 2016 from possibly being a higher number. But I think the same dynamic would have still been at play in the sense that you still would have lost a lot of people come 2018, 2020 just because of the nature of political whims. Again, most people are not ideological. Most people aren't party people. I mean, now more so than in the past, but most people are just living their lives. They're not thinking about property rights. They're not thinking about equality. They're thinking like, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Okay, this is generally the picture that's being painted for me sounds better than the other one. Okay. But I mean, also, I think having gotten to see up close the George Jorgensen campaign, I do think they campaigned well. Okay, I think the campaign was won for the most part well. People can complain about different points and different messages. That's always going to happen. You can never have a messaging that pleases everybody everywhere all the time. So that's to be expected with any campaign. But far as people being enthusiastic who were involved, sticking to, scheduling events, sticking to being active and visible, the George Jorgensen campaign did a great job, especially with like the bus tours for Spike and Joe traveling the country. They raised a good bit of money, especially for a campaign with not as much name recognition as, let's say, Gary Johnson in 2016. Again, all things considered, it was pretty cool. It was pretty positive. It was a campaign. It was a ticket that was less divisive among different factions in the party. Again, there is always, of course, everyone always kind of looks for that one thing so that way they can constantly like plant their fork in the ground and say, okay, here's where I can suddenly, I'm going to complain here. So that way, if things don't go amazing, I can go back and say, I told you so. Not that is at all productive or puts anything in the context or helps at all. So that happens. Like, that's just politics. That's just part of the thing. I don't begrudge people doing that. I just keep moving forward. But again, the point is, like, you have this very large vote total. And again, in a year where we had no business getting such a vote total, when you take a look at the political and cultural dynamics, that means there is a growth in the actual libertarian share of the vote. Okay, now, yes, everyone wants us to be like 30% or 50% or, win the presidency. But let's be realistic. We are asking people to throw the ring in the volcano. We're asking people to not want to use politics to bend the world to their whim. Okay, we're the person telling everybody, hey, eat your vegetables. Okay, because you'll get But again, the flip side of eat your vegetables is you get to grow up and be strong. Okay, and that's like the libertarian message. If we do things the right way, if we do things through voluntary means, if we focus on, making societal decisions through persuasion instead of compulsion, if we try to introduce consent in as much aspects of our daily lives as possible, we'll grow up and be stronger as individuals and as a community. But that's a hard message to make because compulsion's, when you have the levers of power, it's kind of hard not to force people to do the things you want them to do. It's like, well, I can do that. We see that every time the party switches. Okay, like now Democrats are going to be in power, so suddenly Republicans are going to be find truth when it comes to deficits and stuff like that. And when Trump was in power, suddenly Democrats suddenly understood government accountability and the Constitution, separation of powers, and uh, you know uh, you know peace and not war and all that stuff. Bottom line is that when you're speaking against power, it's hard to do that in power. Okay, and that's why libertarians have fortunately been consistent in being speaking truth to power, because the baton hasn't been passed to us yet, and we are continuing to grow. Now again, we're getting our batons passed to us in different ways, as far as winning city council seats, state legislature seats. We're growing, and then those temptations are going to grow, and that's just part of the political process. But we're in the space where we are now sort of powerful enough to say that we are the third voice. We are undeniably the third voice in American politics. Okay, our vote totals, our ballot access, our fundraising is now leaving all other alternatives in the dust. We are clearly the third voice in American politics. Okay, we're not at a point where we are challenging the other two voices in politics yet, in a sense that, in a way where we are displacing them. I still think it's possible. If you listen to my previous podcast, I've talked about how that's possible. But that's a powerful place to be. Okay, if you are the alternative, okay, it's no longer we are one of many alternatives. We are the alternative. Okay, which is clearly seen by the numbers, every metric you can think of. Again, when you compare it to everything else that is considered an alternative, we leave all the others in the dust. And in a year where basically those numbers should have been decimated, we held pretty well and set records I think this was the first election where the Libertarian Party beat all other alternative parties in every state. So in every state, the Libertarian Party was in a strong third relative to everybody else being in the dust. That, I know, I think in 2016, I think Jill Stein got more votes than Gary Johnson did. I know the Green Party candidate got more votes than I did for Senate. And again, going back to this whole idea of the Gary Johnson vote versus the Libertarian vote, we can take a look at my own Senate totals. Okay, when I ran for U.S. Senate in 2016, I was on the same ballot with Gary Johnson. Gary Johnson had 2 spots on the ballot. One spot as a Libertarian, and one spot he also got nominated by the Independence Party. And I think got 100,000 votes under the Independence Party, but only a little over 50,000 votes as the Libertarian candidate. And I got a little bit less than that, 40, I think it was 40 something, 47,000 votes which was actually a decently high for a U.S. Senate candidate for the Libertarian Party in New York. I think maybe the second highest U.S. Senate total, next to Norma Segal back in 1992, which I think was a Ross Perot dynamic, and then and Howard Stern and some other things that were going on at the time. So there's a difference between sort of, again, those who are voting Libertarian versus those who were just voting for Gary Johnson. The fact that people just voted for Gary Johnson to vote for Gary Johnson isn't necessarily a bad thing either. The fact that those people were willing to break the habit of voting for the duopoly still means that they're pliable, and that's a positive sign. Okay. At the end of the day, you don't become a passionate warrior overnight. You have to first be shown that maybe you care about alternative, and over time. So at the same time, yes, we want to recruit, we want to build up our passionate activists, because they're the ones who are going to be able to do the work, and we willing to do the work for free at this stage in the game. But you also need to constantly be sort of whittling away at people's defenses, so that way they can possibly get to that place someday. And not everyone's meant to be an activist. Okay, that's the thing. To win politics, to win races, you do need to kind of have sort of a broad acceptableness. Okay, because most people, again, aren't ideological. If we just run on, hey, we like property rights, most people are gonna be like, okay, and that's fine. We just have to be able to explain and connect our message. Like, again, connect. Either eating your vegetables means you're going to grow up to be strong, not just say eat your vegetables. But the point is, like, 2020 was a good year. 2020 was a good year for the Libertarian Party by every metric. Okay? The only metric that people keep using, though, is comparing it to the 2016 vote total, which is an unrealistic, unfair metric when you put things in the context. But in the fact that we retained so much of the vote, especially when you see how much of the vote other parties lost from their 2016 vote totals. When you take a look at the number of our membership growth in 2016, you take a look at the amount of people who got elected to city council. We won a state legislator seat. You take a look at our total vote total compared to other vote totals, percentage and raw vote total, resulting of the years. And usually, generally, like a higher vote turnout is not generally good for a third party. It kind of drowns out our percentage numbers because people are going to vote Libertarian, are going to vote Libertarian. So generally, when the turnout grows, it just means there's more people who are going to vote for like the two main parties. So that's kind of. But despite all those things, we did well. So overall, I think 2020 is something we should look at with pride and excitement for the future for the Libertarian Party. So my name is Alex Merced. Have a great day and enjoy.